Commander Jake Morrison floated in the observation deck of the Deep Space Station, watching the stars through the massive window. Kepler 442 system was quiet, just like every other day for the past 3 years. His job was to listen for signals from space, but so far space had been very quiet. The station orbited a dead planet, far from Earth and the busy human colonies. Jake and his team of 12 people had volunteered for this lonely duty. They knew that finding alien life was probably impossible, but someone had to keep listening. Someone had to watch the dark between the stars. Dr. Linda Hayes worked at her computer in the next room. She was the station's language expert, ready to decode any alien message they might find. Most days, she studied old Earth languages to keep her skills sharp. Her screens showed nothing but the usual noise from distant stars and the hum of the station's engines. Ryan Clark sat at the communications desk, wearing his headphones and watching the signal displays. He was young, only 25, but he had the best ears on the station. Ryan could pick out the smallest signal from the cosmic background noise. He had been doing this job for 2 years without finding anything interesting. The morning started like any other. Jake drank his coffee and read reports from the other monitoring stations scattered across human space. All of them reported the same thing. Nothing. No alien signals, no signs of intelligent life, no proof that humans were not alone in the universe. Then Ryan sat up straight in his chair. Commander Morrison, Ryan called out, his voice tight with excitement. I'm getting something strange on the long-range array. Jake pushed off from the window and floated over to Ryan's station. Young man's hands moved quickly over his controls, fine-tuning the signal. The display showed a pattern that was clearly not natural. It had structure, rhythm, and purpose.
How far out?
Jake asked. 25 light years, sir. Coming from the Vega system? Jake felt his heart start beating faster. Vega was one of the brightest stars in Earth's sky, visible to anyone who looked up at night. If there was intelligent life there, it had been watching Earth for thousands of years. Linda, get over here, Jake called to the language expert. Dr. Hayes floated over quickly, her eyes wide when she saw the signal patterns on Ryan's screen. This is definitely artificial, she said. The mathematical structure is too complex to be natural. Give me a few minutes to run it through the translation programs. Jake activated the station's alert system. Red lights flashed throughout the small station as the 11 other crew members hurried to their positions. This was what they had trained for, what they had hoped for, and what they had feared. The signal was strong, much stronger than it should be for a transmission across 25 light-years. That meant whoever sent it was using enormous amounts of power. They wanted to be heard across the galaxy. Linda worked at her computer for an hour, running the signal through every translation program humanity had developed. Slowly, patterns began to emerge. The aliens used mathematics and physics concepts that were universal. They built their language on top of these foundations, just like human linguists had predicted. I'm getting fragments, Linda announced. This is definitely a distress call. They're asking for help. Jake felt cold despite the station's warm air. Help with what? Linda's face was pale as she continued working. War, invasion, death. These are the words I can make out clearly. Someone is attacking them. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Linda worked without stopping, slowly building a basic understanding of the alien language. The messages were being broadcast on multiple frequencies, repeated over and over with desperate urgency. Finally, Linda had enough to provide a rough translation. She called everyone to the main room and put the alien message on the speakers. The voice was strange, with sounds no human throat could make. But Linda's computer provided a translation in flat, mechanical English. This is the government of Zalera Prime, broadcasting to any civilization that can hear this message. Our world is under attack by the Krex Dominion. They came from the dark between stars with ships like moving cities. Our defenses were destroyed. In the first day, our cities burn. Millions of our people are dead or taken as slaves. The room fell silent, except for the hum of the station's life support systems. Jake looked around at his crew and saw his own shock reflected in their faces. After decades of searching, humanity's first contact with alien life was a cry for help from a dying world. The alien voice continued. The Kreks strip our world bare. They take our metals, our water, our air. Soon, there will be nothing left of our civilization except this message. We beg any species that receives this transmission to remember us. Tell the galaxy that the Zilani people fought bravely before we fell. Warn others that the Kreks are coming. Linda paused the translation. There's more, but it's just repetitions of the same message. They've been broadcasting this for weeks. Jake stared at the communication display. 25 light-years away. An entire civilization was dying while their message crawled across space at the speed of light. By the time humans received it, the war might already be over. Ryan, open a priority channel to Earth Command, Jake ordered. Full encryption, maximum power. That will drain our power reserves, Ryan warned. Do it anyway. This message needs to reach Earth immediately. As Ryan worked to establish contact with Earth, Jake thought about what this meant for humanity. The galaxy was not empty after all. There were other intelligent species out there, but there were also predators. The universe was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The message to Earth would take 12 hours to arrive. The response would take another 12 hours to return. During that day of waiting, Jake and his crew continued listening to the alien distress calls. Linda worked to improve her translation, picking up more details about the attack. The Zilani were a peaceful people who had never known real war. They lived on a beautiful world with blue oceans and green forests. They created art and music and spent their time learning about the universe. They had never built weapons designed to kill their own kind. The Kreks were the opposite. They were nomads who traveled from star to star, conquering and consuming everything they found. They had been doing this for centuries, leaving behind a trail of dead worlds and extinct civilizations. When Earth's response finally arrived, it was brief and direct. Relief fleet authorized. Prepare detailed intelligence package. Humanity is coming. Jake smiled for the first time since receiving the alien signal. The Zilani had called for help, and help was on the way. It would take decades for human ships to cross the distance too. Vega, but they would come. Earth's children did not abandon those who cried out in the darkness. Captain Lisa Brooks stood on the bridge of the UES Endeavour, watching through the main screen as Earth grew smaller behind them. The relief fleet was finally leaving home. 5 massive warships carrying humanity's best soldiers and most advanced weapons toward the Vega system. The journey would take 50 years, even with their fastest engines. Most of the crew would spend that time in cryogenic sleep, aging only a few months, while decades passed in the real world. It was the only way humans could cross such vast distances and still be young enough to fight when they arrived. Admiral Peter Stone had given Captain Brooks command of the entire fleet. She was 42 years old, a veteran of the colony wars, and one of the best tactical minds in Earth's military. The weight of humanity's first contact mission rested on her shoulders. Dr. Linda Hayes had volunteered to make the journey. She was now the fleet's senior alien expert, the only human who could speak the Zilani language. During the long voyage, she would study every piece of alien data they had collected and prepare for whatever they might find at Vega. Marine Colonel Rick Turner commanded the ground forces. His 3,000 soldiers were the finest fighters humanity had ever produced. They had trained for every possible combat situation, from boarding enemy ships to fighting on alien worlds. Turner himself was a giant of a man, standing almost 7 feet tall, scars from a dozen battles across human space. The fleet's 5 ships were marvels of human engineering. The UES Endeavour was the flagship, carrying the command staff and the primary weapons systems. The UES Hammer and UES Lightning were heavy cruisers, built for ship-to-ship combat. The U-Storm was a carrier, loaded with fighter craft and marine assault pods. The EU's Thunder carried supplies and served as a mobile repair facility. For the first few weeks of the journey, the crew remained awake to conduct final training exercises and equipment checks. Captain Brooks watched her people prepare for war. Against an enemy they knew almost nothing about. The Kreks could be 10 feet tall or 3 inches small. They might breathe different air or need different gravity. They could be stronger than humans or weaker, faster or slower, smarter or more primitive. The only things they knew for certain were that the Kreks were aggressive. They had advanced technology, and they destroyed entire civilizations for resources. Everything else was guesswork, in preparation for the unknown. Dr. Hayes worked in her laboratory, studying the Zilani transmissions that were still arriving from Vega. The signals were getting weaker as time passed, and the content was becoming more desperate. The aliens spoke of their cities falling one by one, of their people being taken as slaves, their beautiful world being stripped bare. She learned that the Zilani were herbivores who had never developed weapons of war. Their technology focused on art, music, and environmental harmony. They lived for several hundred years and spent most of that time learning and creating. War was something they had read about in ancient history but never experienced themselves. The Kreks, according to the Zilani messages, were completely different. They lived on massive ships that traveled between stars. They had no permanent home, no planet they called their own. Instead, they moved from system to system like locusts, consuming everything useful before moving on to the next target. The alien invaders seemed to follow a pattern. They would arrive at a star system without warning and immediately attack any space-based defenses. Then they would land on inhabited worlds and begin strip mining operations while enslaving or killing the local population. When they had taken everything valuable, they would leave the system as a lifeless wasteland. Colonel Turner spent his time training his Marines for combat in unknown conditions. They practiced fighting in different gravities, different atmospheres, and different environments. His soldiers learned to use captured alien weapons and to fight enemies that might be completely different from anything they had faced before. The colonel was particularly interested in the psychological profiles of the Kreks. According to the Zilani broadcasts, the aliens seemed to enjoy causing fear and suffering. They did not simply kill their enemies quickly. Instead, they took pleasure in destroying civilizations slowly, making the victims watch as everything they had built was torn apart. This information told Turner something important about his enemy. The Kreks were bullies who picked on weaker civilizations. They probably had never fought against anyone who could fight back effectively. That might give the humans an advantage if they could survive the first contact. As the months passed, more crew members entered cryogenic sleep. The massive ships continued their journey through the dark between stars. Guided by advanced computers and tended by small rotating crews, Captain Brooks was one of the last to enter cryosleep, staying awake long enough to ensure everything was running smoothly. Dr. Hayes chose to remain active for the entire journey. She could not afford to lose 50 years of research time. Instead, she worked alone in her laboratory, slowly building a complete understanding of Zilani culture and language. She also studied what little they knew about the Kreks, trying to find weaknesses in their tactics and technology. The years passed slowly for Linda. She watched the stars wheel overhead as the fleet traveled deeper into unknown space. She studied thousands of hours of alien transmissions, learning about a civilization that was probably already dead by the time she heard their voices. The Zilani had been artists and philosophers. They created beautiful music that sounded like wind chimes mixed with ocean waves. Their poetry spoke of harmony with nature and the joy of learning new things. They had built cities that looked like living forests, with buildings that grew instead of being constructed. All of that was gone now. It's destroyed by an enemy that saw other life forms as nothing more than resources to be harvested, Linda felt a growing anger as she studied the Zilani culture. These had been good people, peaceful people who had never hurt anyone. They deserved better than extinction at the hands of cosmic predators. 20-5 years into the journey, the long range sensors began picking up new signals from the Vega system. Linda was the first to analyze them, and what she found made her blood run cold. The Zilani voices had gone completely silent. Instead, the system was broadcasting the mechanical signals of heavy industry and mining operations. Captain Brooks was awakened from cryosleep to review Linda's findings. The two women stood in the laboratory looking at data that confirmed their worst fears. The beautiful world described in the Zilani transmissions was probably a lifeless rock by now. How long ago did their signals stop? Brooks asked. About 15 years ago. Ship time, Linda replied. The last transmission was just a single voice, speaking in their ancient prayer language. After that, nothing but mining operations and industrial noise. Captain Brooks studied the data for a long time. Then we're not going to Vega to rescue anyone. We're going there to see what's left and to learn about our enemy. The Kreks might still be there, Linda pointed out. Could be flying into a trap. Good, Brooks said grimly. It's time someone showed these predators that not all prey goes quietly. The fleet continued its journey toward Vega, carrying humanity's finest warriors toward a confrontation that would change the galaxy forever. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Vega system. Captain Lisa Brooks stood on the bridge of the UES Endeavour, staring at the tactical display with growing horror. The system that should have been home to a thriving alien civilization looked like a graveyard. Commander Alex Stone led the scout ships deeper into the system, using advanced stealth technology to avoid detection. His 3 small vessels moved like ghosts between the planets, gathering data and taking pictures of what remained of the Zilani homeworld.
Captain.
You need to see this. Alex's voice came through the communication system. His usual calm tone was shaken. Zalera Prime is... It's gone, ma'am. The whole planet is dead. And the main screen showed the images from the scout ships. Where the Zilani had described a beautiful blue world covered in forests and oceans, there was now a brown, lifeless rock. The planet's surface was covered in massive scars from strip mining operations. Every mountain had been carved away. Every ocean had been drained dry. Dr. Linda Hayes studied the images with tears in her eyes. She had spent 25 years learning about Zilani culture, reading their poetry, listening to their music. Now she was looking at the grave of an entire civilization. Where are the Krek ships? Colonel Rick Turner asked, studying the tactical display. The system looks empty. Captain Brooks ordered a full sensor sweep of the entire Vega system. Took several hours to complete, but the results were clear. There were no Krek ships, no alien stations, no signs of any living presence. The invaders had taken everything valuable and moved on, leaving behind only industrial waste and empty space. Permission to land a survey team on the surface, Colonel Turner requested. Brooks nodded. Take a full company of Marines. I want to know exactly what happened down there. The landing shuttles descended through Zalera Prime's poisoned atmosphere. The air was thick with industrial chemicals and metal dust. Even with their environmental suits, the Marines could smell the death that covered the planet. Colonel Turner led his team through what had once been the Zilani capital city. The buildings were all gone, torn down and processed for their raw materials. Only foundations remained, showing where millions of aliens had once lived, worked, and created art, in the center of the ruined city. They found something that made Turner's blood boil with rage. The Kreks had built a monument to their victory, a tall metal tower covered in symbols that Dr. Hayes translated as a list of conquered worlds. Zalera Prime was just one entry among hundreds of others. Been doing this for centuries, Turner reported to the fleet. This isn't war, it's farming. They treat entire civilizations like crops to be harvested. The Marines spread out across the planet, searching for any survivors or useful information. Most of what they found was debris and industrial waste. The Kreks had been thorough in their destruction. They had even stripped away the planet's topsoil and processed it for trace minerals, but in the ruins of what had been a university, Marine Sergeant Ben Clark made an important discovery. Hidden beneath collapsed buildings, he found a Zilani data storage facility that had somehow survived the Dester UCTION. Dr. Hayes was brought down to the surface immediately. She worked for hours to access the alien computers, using her knowledge of their language and technology, when she finally broke through their security systems. What she found changed everything. The Zilani had been tracking the Kreks for decades before the invasion. They had studied the aliens' movement patterns, their technology, and their methods. The data cores contained detailed information about how the Kreks operated and where they were likely to strike next. This is incredible, Linda reported to Captain Brooks. The Zilani were scientists to the end. Even while their world was being destroyed, they kept gathering data about their attackers. The most important discovery was a star chart showing the Krex fleet's historical movement pattern. The nomadic aliens followed a spiral route through the galaxy, moving from the outer rim toward the center. They attacked star systems in a predictable sequence, allowing them to process each conquest while traveling to the next target. Intelligence Officer Danny Wright studied the chart with growing alarm. He cross-referenced the Krex timeline with human star charts and made a calculation that sent ice through his veins. Captain Danny called from his workstation. Based on this data, the Krex fleet should have reached human space 15 years ago. Captain Brooks felt the blood drain from her face.
What do you mean?
According to the Zilani tracking data, the Krex follow a specific route. After they finished here, their next targets would have been the star systems on the edge of human territory. Brooks immediately ordered a priority message sent to Earth, despite the enormous distance. The transmission would take 25 years to reach home, but Earth Command needed to know that humanity might already be under attack. While they waited for Earth's response, the fleet conducted a thorough investigation of the Vega system. They found evidence of the Krex industrial methods, their ship designs, and their tactical preferences. Most importantly, they found proof that the aliens had a fatal weakness. The Krex had never fought a real war. For centuries, they had attacked peaceful civilizations that had no experience with violence. Their tactics were designed for overwhelming, defenseless targets, not for fighting enemies that could fight back. Colonel Turner studied captured Krex weapons and found them to be powerful, but crude. The aliens relied on brute force rather than skill or strategy. Their armor was designed to intimidate rather than to provide real protection. Their ships were built for cargo capacity rather than maneuverability. They're bullies, Turner reported to the fleet commanders. They're used to their enemies running away or surrendering immediately. They've never had to adapt to fighting someone who fights back. Dr. Hayes made another disturbing discovery in the Zilani data cores. The Krex didn't just kill their victims. Quickly, they deliberately prolonged the suffering, taking pleasure in watching civilizations die slowly. They kept some aliens alive as slaves, forcing them to watch as their worlds were destroyed. This information filled the human crew with cold fury. The Zilani had been peaceful people who had never hurt anyone. They had spent their time creating beautiful art and studying the universe. They had called out to the stars for help, and no one had come in time to save them. 20-5 years later, Earth's response finally arrived. The message was brief and terrifying. Multiple colony worlds have gone silent over the past decade, initially attributed to equipment failures. Now suspect Krex involvement. No distress signals received. Assumed communications were jammed immediately. Upon attack, Captain Brooks read the message aloud to her senior staff. The silence that followed was broken only by the hum of the ship's engines. "So we're too late to save the Zilani," Colonel Turner said finally. "And we might be too late to save our own people." "Out." "Not necessarily," Brooks replied, her voice hard. As steel, the Krex left a trail when they passed through our space. We can follow it. We can find them. And then what? Dr. Hayes asked. Brooks looked at the images of dead Zalera Prime on the main screen. Then we show them what happens when someone attacks humanity's children. We show them that not all prey goes quietly into the dark. The human fleet began preparing for a hunt that would take them deep into unknown space. Following the trail of destruction left by humanity's first alien enemy, Captain Lisa Brooks stood before her assembled crew in the main hangar of the UES Endeavour. 5,000 human soldiers, scientists, and officers filled the space, their faces grim with purpose. Behind them on the massive display screen were images of dead Zalera Prime and data showing the Krex fleet's probable location. "We came here to rescue the Zilani," Brooks announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the hangar. "We arrived 50 years too late for that. But we're not too late to make sure this never happens again." The crew had spent the past 6 months studying everything they could learn about the Krex from the Zilani data cores. Dr. Linda Hayes had worked with the engineering teams to reverse engineer Krex technology, improving human weapons and shields. Colonel Rick Turner had trained his Marines in new tactics specifically designed to fight the alien invaders. Most importantly, Intelligence Officer Danny Wright had tracked the Krex fleet's movement pattern. The aliens were currently attacking a star system called Marati, home to an aquatic species that lived on ocean worlds. According to the Zalani data, the Marati were even more peaceful than the Zalani had been. The Krex think they're the apex predators of the galaxy, Brooks continued. They've spent centuries attacking civilizations that never fought back. Today, they're going to learn what happens when predators meet something higher on the food chain. The human fleet had been transformed during their months in the Vega system. They had stripped useful technology from the Krex industrial sites and integrated it into their own ships. Their weapons were now hybrid designs that combined human engineering with alien power sources. Their armor had been upgraded with Krex defensive systems, but the most important change was not in their equipment. It was in their attitude. The humans had seen what the Krex did to peaceful civilizations. They had walked through the ruins of Zalera Prime and read the final messages of a dying people. They had learned that their own colonies might already be under attack. The crew of the relief fleet was no longer on a rescue mission. They were on a hunt. The journey to the Marati system took only 3 weeks. As they approached, long-range sensors confirmed their worst fears. The Krex fleet was already there, their massive ships orbiting the beautiful blue worlds like vultures around a corpse. Commander Alex Stone led the scout ships forward for reconnaissance. What they found made the humans even angrier. The Krex had built orbital platforms around the Marati homeworld and were using them to drain the planet's oceans. Massive pipelines stretched down from space, sucking away the water that billions of aquatic aliens needed to survive. The Marati are still fighting, Alex reported. I'm detecting weapons fire on the surface. Some of their underwater cities are still holding out. Colonel Turner studied the tactical display with savage satisfaction. Good. We're not too late this time. The Krex fleet was enormous. 300 ships of various sizes surrounded the Marati worlds, from small fighters to massive industrial vessels, the size of cities. The aliens clearly expected no resistance from space. They had positioned their ships for maximum efficiency. In stripping the planets, not for defense against attack, Captain Brooks smiled for the first time in months. It was not a pleasant expression. All ships, battle stations. Turner, prepare your Marines for boarding operations. Hayes, activate the new communication systems. I want every ship in this system to hear what comes next. The human fleet dropped out of stealth mode at the edge of the system and accelerated toward the Krex formation at maximum speed. The alien ships were caught completely off guard. They had grown so accustomed to attacking defenseless civilizations that they had forgotten how to respond to an actual threat. The first Krex ship died before its crew even realized they were under attack. The U's Lightning fired a spread of nuclear missiles that turned the alien vessel into expanding plasma. The second ship managed to raise its shields before 3 more human ships focused their fire on it, overwhelming its defenses in seconds. But the real shock for the Krex came when Colonel Turner's Marines began boarding their ships. The aliens had expected to fight terrified civilians, or at most lightly armed planetary defense forces. Instead, they found themselves facing human soldiers who had trained for decades to perfect the art of killing. The Marines moved through Krex ships like a force of nature, destroying everything in their path. Marine Sergeant Ben Clark led his squad through the corridors of a Krex command ship, his enhanced combat armor turning him into a walking tank. The aliens tried to stop him with their energy weapons, but the human soldiers just laughed and kept advancing. Clark had fought in the brutal colony wars where humans had learned to kill other humans. Killing aliens was no harder. The Krex warriors were bigger than humans, standing 8 feet tall with thick armor-like skin. But they moved slowly and thought even slower. They had never learned to fight enemies that were smaller, faster, and far more vicious than themselves. These things fight like amateurs, Clark reported over the combat channel. They're all size and no skill. The space battle lasted less than 4 hours. The human fleet was outnumbered 60-1, but numbers meant nothing when the enemy had never learned how to fight. Krek ships exploded in brilliant flashes as human weapons tore through their defenses. The few alien vessels that tried to escape were hunted down and destroyed without mercy. When the last Krek's ship was reduced to drifting wreckage, Captain Brooks opened a communication channel to the Maradi homeworld. Dr. Hayes had learned enough of their language to provide basic translation. People of Maradi, this is Captain Lisa Brooks of the human fleet. The Krek ships have been destroyed. Your worlds are safe. The response from the ocean world was a mixture of joy, relief, and shock. The Maradi had been fighting a hopeless battle against an enemy they could not defeat. Suddenly, mysterious strangers from the stars had appeared and wiped out their attackers in a matter of hours. But the humans were not finished. Colonel Turner's Marines had captured several Krek survivors during the boarding operations. Under interrogation, the aliens revealed the location of their main fleet and their planned targets. They have a base in the Rigel system, Turner reported. To Captain Brooks, over 1,000 ships, plus their mobile shipyards and resource processing facilities. That's where they're building their invasion fleets. Brooks looked at the star charts showing the location of the Krek's base. It was deep, in unexplored space, far from any known civilization. It's a perfect place for galactic predators to plan their next attacks. Set course for Rigel, she ordered. It's time to end this. Human fleet left the Maradi system with the grateful thanks of an entire species. But they also left with something else. A message that spread throughout the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. The Maradi used their long-range communication networks to tell other civilizations what they had witnessed. They described the terrifying but benevolent creatures from a small yellow star who had appeared like avenging angels to destroy the Krek's fleet. They spoke of warriors who fought with such ferocity that the galaxy's most feared predators had been swept aside like insects. Other species that had hidden in fear of the Kreks began to hope for the first time in centuries. Perhaps the age of cosmic predators was finally coming to an end. In the depths of space, the human fleet raced toward its final confrontation with an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for too long. They carried with them the fury of every extinct civilization, the hope of every threatened world, and the promise that humanity's children would never stand alone in the dark. Admiral Peter Stone's final message to Earth Command became legendary throughout human space. The Zalani called for help, but we arrived too late to save them. We couldn't bring back the dead, but we made sure they didn't die for nothing. Let this be a lesson to anyone who thinks humanity's children are easy prey. We don't just fight back, we hunt down the hunters. The age of humanity's expansion into the galactic community had begun, built on a foundation of righteous violence and the ashes of their enemies.